On Mother's Day, in front of 40 people, the son I chose in a courtroom when he was 7 years old raised his glass and said, "I wish you'd never been my mother. I'll tell you what happened next. But first, I need you to know something I have never said out loud in 32 years. He wasn't entirely wrong, because I'm the one who built him." The party was in Grant's backyard, out in Hidden Springs, on the second Sunday of May, 5 o'clock, that good slanted light coming sideways through the maples he'd planted the year Cal was born. 68 degrees, the kind of Idaho evening people move here for. I paid for all of it, the catering, the rented tables and folding chairs, the cake with the fondant roses that nobody ended up eating, the 2 young men in black shirts who circulated with trays and called me ma'am. I made one thing myself, the potato salad. I made it because it was the only dish Walt ever told me I was good at. And he'd been dead 16 years. And I still cooked for him sometimes without admitting it. Grant stood up around 6. He tapped his glass with a butter knife the way people do in movies, and everybody quieted down. And he smiled at me the way he used to smile when he wanted the last of something. He started with the crawl space. "When I was 15, he said, my mother made me crawl under a house in July to reseal a duct. 98 degrees outside, probably 120 under there. There was a dead possum. There was a possum, and it was dead, and she made me finish the duct first." They laughed. My sister Karen laughed hardest. He went on, how I wouldn't let him buy a car until he was 19. How he'd had to save for it selling filters door to door. The laughter had that easy Sunday evening sound to it. Then he stopped laughing and kept talking. There was no music, nobody cued anything. I remember sparrows fussing in the hydrangeas along the fence, and the neighbor's sprinkler ticking through its cycle 2 yards over. Cal, who is 13, stood there holding a paper plate and did not move. Bo, who is 6, looked up at his mother and said, "What did Daddy say?" I want to tell you I felt something enormous. I didn't. What I felt was the strap of my sandal and the fork in my hand, and one small stupid thought that arrived before the big ones. I still have potato starch under my thumbnail. That is what my mind offered me. 40 people watching, my grandchildren watching. And I stood there thinking about my hands. So I set the fork down on the paper plate. I lined it up straight, the way I line up wrenches on a bench, because 38 years in a trade will do that to a woman. Then I stood up. Grant was braced. I could see it in his shoulders. He was waiting for volume. He had already written that evening in his head, his mother shrieking in front of his children, proving whatever story he'd been telling himself. I said, "Then live like you never had one." And then, because it was the truest thing I knew, and because I am not a cruel woman, I added, "I think you'll find that's harder than you're expecting." I didn't run. There was no scene. I walked into the kitchen, I picked up the Tupperware the potato salad had come in, and I rinsed it under the tap, dried it with a dish towel that had a rooster on it, and I snapped the lid on and set it in my tote bag. I don't know how to explain that to anybody under 60. My world had come apart on the other side of a sliding glass door, and I washed a container because that is what we do. My mother washed containers through a foreclosure. My grandmother washed containers through a war. The hands keep going when nothing else will. Simone was standing by the refrigerator. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. The Corvette keys were on the hook by the garage door, on the little brass ring shaped like a fish that Walt bought at a gas station outside Riggins in 1998. I took them. 14 minutes later, I was stopped at the light where State Street crosses 23rd, and my phone buzzed in the cup holder. "Bring the car back." "It's my car. I'll call the cops." I read it twice. Then I turned the phone face down on the passenger seat and I laughed. One short, ugly sound. Alone in a car at a red light. Not because it was funny, because after everything, my son still believed that car belonged to him. He thought that car was his. He was wrong, but he was wrong in a way so much worse than he knew. And I was the only person alive who understood why. Here is the part nobody at that party knew. At 9 that morning, 8 hours before he raised his glass, Grant pulled me into his garage and shut the door. He had a folder, a nice one, leather, with a magnetic flap. He set it on the workbench between us and opened it like a man who had practiced opening it. $340,000. A warehouse shell in Meridian, off Franklin, 12,000 square feet, tenant already interested. He had cap rates and absorption numbers and construction costs. He had answers before I had questions. He needed one thing from me, not money, a signature, a personal guarantee. I know what a personal guarantee is. I have signed 9 of them. When you sign one, you are not lending anything. You are promising a bank that if the deal dies, they can come take whatever you have instead. Your house, your accounts, your company. I read it slowly, because I always read slowly, because I learned bookkeeping at a kitchen table at 31 from a man with a 10th grade education and better sense than anybody I have met since. On page 2, under partners, there was a second name, Brett Lanier. I met him once, Thanksgiving, 2 years back. He shook my hand a beat too long and told me my house had good bones. And then he did the thing I have never forgotten. He looked up, at the ceiling, at the crown molding, the fixtures, the beam over the dining room. He wasn't admiring any of it. He was pricing it. I closed the folder. No! Grant laughed. Not a mean laugh, a confused one. The kind you give when a word comes out wrong. Sorry, what? I said no. He waited for the rest of it. There had always been a rest. Not this year. Let me talk to the bank. Let me look at it after the party. 32 years of my sentences having a second half. Mom, he said it carefully, like he was reading it off something. You've never said no to me. I know. My hand was flat on the folder. I remember the cold of that metal flap. I think that's the problem. He stood there 3 seconds. I counted them. I don't know why, except that some part of me understood I was going to want them later. Then he laughed again, the short kind with nothing inside it, and squared the folder against the bench the way men do when their hands need a job. Fine, he said, and he walked out into the yard where the caterers were unfolding tables. 8 hours later, he stood up and tapped his glass. I drove up to Table Rock afterward. Habit, maybe. Walt used to take me up there in the truck when a job went bad, and we would sit on the tailgate and look down at Boise laid out flat and lit, and he would say the town looked better when you couldn't hear it. I sat in the Corvette in the gravel lot and let in a memory I had been holding off for years. October 2008. The second time I paid off Grant's credit cards, $19,000. I did it out of the business account and didn't tell Walt, and he found it anyway, because he always found it. He wasn't angry. That was the worst of it. He was tired. You're not saving him, Mo. You're buying him back, a little at a time. If I don't help him, he'll hate me. He'll hate you anyway. He said it gently. That is how I knew he meant it. He'll just be richer while he does it. And I said the thing I had never once said out loud in 16 years of marriage. You get to say that. You get to be sure he's yours. I have to prove it. Walt didn't answer. He stood in that kitchen with a coffee going cold in his hand and looked at me a long time, longer than was comfortable, longer than a man usually looks at his wife. Then he said, "You never had to prove anything, but I can't make you believe that." He was right, and he was dead 2 years later. And I never did believe it. I won that argument. I want you to understand that I won. I wrote the check, and I kept writing them. And I was right about how to love him. Every day since, I have wished I had lost. In 32 years, I paid for everything except one thing: the right to say no. I saved that one. It turned out to cost more than all the rest of it put together. I got the rest of it later, from the officer, in the flat way police tell you things. Grant walked into the Boise Police Department on a Tuesday morning. He was calm, he was polite, he was wearing a jacket. The clerk said he was the most reasonable person she'd dealt with all day. He said his vehicle had been taken by a family member who refused to return it. He gave the plate, she typed it in. It takes about 40 seconds. The plate goes into the state system. The state system talks to the national one, and a name comes back on the screen. It does not care who is standing at the counter or how good his jacket is. Maureen E. Callahan. Sir, this vehicle is registered to Maureen Callahan. That makes it a civil matter, not a theft. We can't take this report. That should have been the end of it. 60 seconds, a wasted morning, a man driving home embarrassed. But they had handed him the form first, and he had already filled it out and signed the line at the bottom, the line that says the information above is true under penalty of law. He signed it before they ran the plate. Detective Angela Ruiz called me Thursday afternoon. I was in the shop with a clipboard in my hand and Rosa waving through the office glass. And I said I'd take it outside. She told me the sworn statement had been forwarded to the Ada County Prosecutor's Office, that a false report to law enforcement is a misdemeanor in Idaho, that they needed to know whether I would cooperate. "You don't have to decide today," she said. "If I do cooperate, what happens to him?" "Probably probation and a fine. First offense. A judge might be generous." She paused. "It would also be a criminal conviction on every job application he fills out for the rest of his life. And if I don't, then generally it goes away." I stood in the gravel behind the shop with the phone against my ear and said nothing for what felt like a long time. A truck backed up somewhere. Somebody's radio was playing inside. "Mrs. Callahan," her voice changed, softer, but not soft. "I've been doing this 19 years. These calls are almost never actually about the car." "No," I said. "They almost never are." That night, I did what I have done a few hundred evenings since 2019. I went out to the garage, got into the Corvette, and didn't start it. That's the whole ritual. I sit in it. I put my hands on the wheel. I don't turn the key. Walt would have thought that was the stupidest thing a person could do with a car. And I suppose it is. Nobody has ever sat in the passenger seat. Not once. Not Grant. In 2 years of driving it, he always took it alone. I opened the glove box looking for a napkin and found something I had forgotten was in there. Walt's notebook, the little brown leather one he kept in his shirt pocket for 30 years. Full of static pressures and refrigerant charges and part numbers in that slanted left-handed writing of his. The writing that always looked like it was leaning into a wind. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. The last entry has a date at the top, June 4th, 2010, 11 days before the stroke. It isn't a job. It isn't a part number. Corvette Stingray, gray, when Grant settles down. That's it. That's the whole line. He was waiting. 53 years old, 6 trucks, a bad heart he didn't know he had. And he was waiting for his son to settle down before he would let himself have the one thing he ever wanted. He died waiting. I sat in that garage a long while with the notebook open on my knee. I didn't decide anything that night. I want to be honest about that. No clean conclusion arrived under the fluorescent light. But I knew one thing before I went inside. I was not going to sign anything that helped a prosecutor. Whatever happened next, it was not going to be that. I just didn't know yet what I was going to do instead. People say forgiveness is letting go. It isn't. Forgiveness is deciding which part of the cost you are going to carry, and then carrying it without telling anybody. People ask me how it got that far. I could answer with feelings. I have plenty. But I ran a company for 38 years, so I am going to answer the way I know how. I am going to answer with invoices. The first line, October 2021. A fundraiser for St. Luke's Children's, black tie, a table was $18,000, and I bought one. I have never once in my life wanted to go to a black tie fundraiser. I bought it because a commercial developer named Polson was seated at the next table, and Grant had been trying to get 20 minutes with that man for a year. I never told Grant what the table cost. He would have thanked me and meant it, and somehow that would have been worse. Sometime after the auction, a man came in from the valet stand and announced to the room that whoever owned the gray Corvette outside had excellent taste. Grant said, "Thanks, that was all. Not that's my mother's. Not she bought it after my dad died. Just thanks." And a small nod. And the conversation moved on before I could say anything without making a scene out of nothing. In the car going home, I said, "You forgot to mention whose car it was." He laughed. He was in a good mood. The 20 minutes had gone well. "Mom, does that really matter?" And I said no. I said no. I suppose it doesn't. That is the sentence. That is the whole thing. Right there. A woman agreeing that it doesn't matter. Price of the first line, $18,000 and one word. The second line, July 2023. I drove up to the cabin at Payette without calling first, which I had every right to do, with 4 bags of groceries and a cooler of steaks. I came around the side of the house and heard voices on the deck, and I stopped. "The way you do," Grant was saying. "You should see this place at Christmas. It's basically our second home. Not my mom's place, not the cabin my parents bought in '98, ours. And then Simone, easy as weather. We'll probably redo the kitchen once everything's official. I stood on the gravel with the cooler handle cutting into my palm and made a decision in about 2 seconds. I went back to the car, loaded the groceries in, drove around, and came up the front steps loud, calling hello, so they would hear me coming. Everyone smiled. Nobody explained anything. Nobody had to. 3 weeks later, a cabinet maker in McCall sent an invoice for $60,000 to my address in Boise. New kitchen, quartz counters, soft close everything. I paid it. I never mentioned it. Not to Grant, not to Simone, not to a living soul until right now. Price of the second line, $60,000 and one word. The third line, August 2024. Our 38th summer. We throw a picnic every year for the crews and their families. Barbecue, a dunk tank, kids running wild through the lot behind the shop. Late in the afternoon, one of my senior installers, a man who has been setting furnaces for me since Clinton was president, clapped Grant on the shoulder and said, "Bet it feels good, knowing you'll take it over someday." And my son said, "I'm looking forward to putting my own stamp on things." My own stamp. I was 11 feet away with a paper cup of lemonade in my hand. I watched Ray Okonkwo look at Rosa Delgado. Rosa looked back at Ray. Neither of them looked at me, which is how I knew exactly how bad it was. That week, 2 of my best installers gave notice. Both of them said it was about money. I gave them both raises. I did not ask a single question, because I did not want the answer said out loud in my office, where I would have had to do something about it. Price of the third line about $40,000 a year, and very nearly the 2 best pairs of hands I had. $78,000 for the first 2, $40,000 a year for the third. I paid every dollar of it to buy silence, and I called it love. There is another word for what I was doing. The word is bribery. I was bribing myself, so I would not have to have one hard conversation with the boy I raised. 32 years of it. Every time, I told myself I was keeping the peace. I was only keeping the quiet. That Sunday night, the family group text went off like a transformer. 40 people at that party, 18 of them in that thread. Some defended me. Some said I had overreacted, that he'd had a couple of drinks, that he didn't mean it. My sister Karen wrote you should call him and apologize. My Aunt Dot left the group. And somewhere in that yard, somebody had held up a phone and recorded the whole toast. Dolores Whitfield has been my lawyer for 31 years. She is 67, she wears reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she has never in her life warmed up to a subject. I sat down. She did not offer coffee. Before we discuss anything, one question. Are you doing this because you're angry? If I were angry, I'd cut him out of everything. Are you going to? No. Then what are we doing here, Mo? I looked out her window at 9th Street for a while. I think I confused loving him with allowing him, and I want to know what that mistake costs. Dee took her glasses off. All right, she said. Now we can work. She pulled a legal pad toward her and drew a line down the middle of it. 3 things before you sign anything. 1. A will does not protect you. A will doesn't do a thing until you're dead. And then it goes through probate, which is a court proceeding, which is a public record. Anybody can walk into that courthouse and read it. Anybody can file against it. Your son could tie your estate up for 2 years and spend a quarter of it on lawyers doing it. I told her I hadn't known that. 31 years in business, and I hadn't known that. Most people don't, she said. 2. A trust is different. A trust is alive the day you sign it. It's private. No courthouse, no public file. But hear me, if you cut Grant out entirely, he will sue. Not maybe. He'll claim you weren't of sound mind, or that somebody got in your ear. And juries are sentimental about disinherited children. So what do? 3. We leave him something. $50,000. I stared at her. After all of this, you're telling me to give him $50,000? I'm telling you to give him something to lose. She tapped the pad twice with her pen. Cut him to 0 and he sues you with nothing at risk. Leave him $50,000 with a no contest clause attached, and the day he files against this trust is the day he loses the $50,000. I sat with that a moment. So it isn't a gift. It's a lock, Dee said. It just looks like a gift. Then she asked for 2 more things, and those 2 are what made me understand she had done this before, many times, for people sitting in the same chair I was sitting in. First, a letter from my physician, dated the same day I signed, stating I was of sound mind and capable of making financial decisions. Second, the signing itself recorded on video, with 2 witnesses in the room. I laughed. It came out ugly. So I have to prove I'm not senile in order not to give money to my own son. Yes, Dee said, and she didn't soften it. And someday you are going to be glad you did. Then I told her what I wanted for the company, and she put her pen down. I had come in with a phrase I'd read somewhere. Employee ownership. I wanted the 80 people who built Callahan Comfort to own Callahan Comfort. That's a beautiful idea, Dee said. Here is what it actually is: an independent valuation, a separate trustee who legally answers to those employees and not to you, a filing with the Department of Labor, and probably the largest bank loan of your life. 12 to 18 months, minimum, $200,000 in professional fees before you pay a dime of interest. Then we do it another way. And we did. Ray Okonkwo and 4 of my managers would buy the company from me over 10 years. And I would carry the note myself, me as the bank. No outside lender, no debt sitting on top of the cruise. There was a Texas outfit that had been circling us for 3 years. Between what they would have paid and what Ray's group could, the difference came to about $2,400,000. I will be honest, I sat in my truck afterward and thought about that number for a good while. The cabin at Payette went to a veterans retreat organization. That is not a sentence I got to write in one afternoon. They turned it down the first time, politely, apologetically, and completely. A donated building is not a gift to a small nonprofit. It is a roof, a septic system, insurance, and a property tax bill they cannot carry. So I attached a $250,000 endowment to maintain it. Then they said yes. The investment accounts went into a scholarship fund at the College of Western Idaho Foundation, named for Walt, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, carpentry, kids who want to build something with their hands. At the end of it, Dee capped her pen. Last question. If Grant died tomorrow, would you regret this trust? Yes. Then why sign it? Because if I die first, and I haven't signed it, he will never become the man Walt believed he could be. I picked up my purse. I would rather live with my regret than have him live with the consequences of my cowardice. Grant arrived at Mo's house just after 6, with Simone beside him and impatience written across his face. He did not sit down. He placed a folder on the kitchen table, slid a pen across the wood, and spoke as though the matter had been settled long ago. Sign it. Mo looked at the folder, then at her son. What am I signing? The transfer? The truck? Put it in my name. Simone stayed near the doorway, arms folded, sunglasses still covering her eyes, though the sun was almost gone. Grant tapped the papers. Mom, you already gave it to me. I let you use it, Mo said. For 2 years. That's the same thing. No, Grant, it isn't. His mouth tightened. I paid for repairs. I bought tires. I registered it with my insurance. Everyone knows it's mine. You maintained something you were borrowing. I built my life around that truck. And I trusted you with it. Grant laughed once, sharply, then pulled out his wallet. He removed an insurance card and held it between 2 fingers like a winning hand. Look, my name, right there, on the insurance. For one suspended second, even Simone seemed convinced. Grant stepped closer, confidence returning to his posture. You put me on the policy. You knew what that meant. Mo took the card, studied it, and placed it flat on the table. That is the list of people permitted to drive the vehicle, she said. It is not a list of owners. Grant blinked. I added your name so that if you caused an accident, you would not lose everything. I was protecting you. You mistook protection for possession. His jaw shifted, but he said nothing. And in Idaho, Mo continued, a title transfer requires a notarized signature. Have you ever seen me stand before a notary and sign that truck over to you? Grant stared at her. No, Mo said. You have not. She crossed the kitchen, opened the fireproof cabinet beneath the pantry shelf, and carried its contents to the table. One by one, she laid them out: the purchase agreement, the registration, the insurance application, and the certificate of title. The room changed when the title touched the wood. Simone removed her sunglasses. She picked up the paper carefully, scanning the printed lines twice. The color left her face. "It really is in her name," she whispered. Grant snatched the title from her. His eyes moved across it, hunting for some mistake, some second name, some loophole. There was only one owner, Mo Callahan. Grant looked up, wounded anger replacing certainty. "So you lied to me. I never told you it was yours." "You let me believe it. You assumed it. There is a difference." He pushed back from the table. "You always do this. You act generous, then keep score." Mo stood very still. For years, those words would have made her retreat, apologize, or surrender something simply to keep him near. This time, she turned and walked into her office. When she returned, she carried a yellowed envelope. She placed it beside the title. "What is that?" Grant asked. "Something else you decided belonged to you automatically." Inside was an adoption decree from the Ada County Court, dated March 14, 1994. Beneath it lay a fading Polaroid, a 7-year-old boy in an oversized suit, standing on courthouse steps, holding the hand of a 31-year-old woman whose smile looked brave and terrified at once. Grant stopped breathing for a moment. Mo touched the edge of the photograph. "You said you wished I had never been your mother." She said, "Grant, I was never simply your mother by accident. I chose to become your mother." His eyes stayed on the boy in the photograph. On March 14, 1994. "I stood before a judge and asked for the right to call you my son. The judge asked me 3 times whether I was certain." Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "I said yes 3 times. Simone looked away. "You did not inherit the Callahan name," Mo continued. "It was given to you. The only thing you ever had to earn was the right to carry it with decency." Grant lowered himself into a kitchen chair. For 4 minutes, he said nothing. Mo watched him, and for the first time she understood the fear beneath every favor she had ever granted him. For 32 years, she had worried that one wrong answer, one boundary, one refusal might prove what she had secretly feared, that he had never accepted her as his mother. So she had excused him, rescued him, paid for him, forgiven him before he apologized, not because she was weak, because she had spent 32 years trying to be chosen by the child she had chosen first. 3 days later, Simone returned alone. She wore no makeup and no sunglasses. Without Grant beside her, she looked younger and less certain. "I thought you gave him the truck," she said. "I never said that. No," Simone admitted. "You didn't." She stared at the kitchen table where the papers had been spread, but I kept telling him that eventually everything would be ours. I thought I was motivating him. She paused, then pressed her lips together. Maybe I was only feeding his ego. Mo did not comfort her. She let the truth remain between them. Uncovered at last. For 4 weeks, peace returned in small, careful pieces. Grant called every Sunday. The conversations were short, polite, and unexpectedly sincere. He asked how Mo was sleeping. He told her when the truck needed maintenance. Once, he apologized for raising his voice without asking for anything in return. Mo did not trust the change completely, but she allowed herself to notice it. By the 4th Sunday, she opened the cabinet above the refrigerator and took down the old cake carrier she had not used in months. She washed it, dried it, and left it on the counter. Hope, she thought, did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it looked like preparing dessert for someone who had not yet earned an invitation. For the first time since papers had covered her kitchen table, she imagined patience might become something other than surrender. She imagined Grant returning because he understood, not because he needed access to what she owned. 3 months after the confrontation in the kitchen, Dee called. Mo was standing at the sink with a dish towel in her hand when she answered. "I just received a request for your medical records," Dee said. Mo stopped wiping the plate. "From whom?" "A law office in Boise. Their client is Grant Callahan." The kitchen seemed to narrow around her. "What do they want?" Dee exhaled once before answering. "The stated purpose is to evaluate the cognitive capacity of the person who created the trust." Mo stared at the cabinet where the cake carrier waited. "He is going to say I am confused. He is going to say you are confused." The dish towel remained clenched in Mo's hand. "Can he win no?" Dee's answer came immediately. "Because I made you complete a cognitive evaluation on the day you signed the trust." "Do you remember how much you hated me that afternoon?" Mo closed her eyes. She remembered the doctor's questions, the memory exercises, the irritated silence during the drive home. "I remember. And how do you feel about me now?" A long silence followed. "I still hate you," Mo said, "just in a different way." Dee laughed once, but Mo did not. After the call, Mo stood alone in the kitchen. She did not phone Grant. She did not send a message. She did not warn Simone, contact another relative, or post anything in the family group chat. There would be no performance, no public accusation, and no invitation for Grant to replace responsibility with another polished apology. The next morning, Mo drove to the post office carrying one envelope. She sent it by certified mail. Inside was a copy of the doctor's cognitive capacity assessment, signed June 22, 2026. Beneath it was a copy of the trust's no contest clause, with the relevant paragraph highlighted in yellow. On top, Mo placed one handwritten note. "Grant, I prepared this from the first day. Not against you, for you. I did it so you would not lose a year and $40,000 in legal fees while refusing to work. I am not angry. I am tired. I am still here when you are ready, Mom." She did not add that readiness meant honesty. She did not explain that forgiveness was not the removal of consequences. She did not write that "I am sorry" had become too easy for him, a phrase used to reopen doors without changing what he carried through them. The document said what her anger could not. The wall had existed before he decided to run toward it. 11 days later, Grant withdrew the legal request. He offered no explanation. By then, another structure in his life had already collapsed. Brett Lanier disappeared with $90,000 of Grant's investment money. His phone stopped working. His office was empty. The promises of fast returns, property deals, and easy wealth vanished with him. The man who had encouraged Grant to challenge Mo's judgment had taken advantage of Grant's own hunger to possess what he had not built. Soon afterward, Simone moved in with her sister, months later. Grant told Mo the final sentence Simone had said before leaving. "I married a man who wanted to inherit a life instead of building one." Mo did not celebrate. She did not tell him Simone was right. She simply listened. Brett's disappearance ended his role as the voice feeding Grant's entitlement. Simone's departure removed the audience that had rewarded it. What remained was Grant, alone with the difference between regret and change. Mo still loved him, but she would not confuse love with rescue again. There are times when the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them hit the wall you already built. Then hand them the blueprint so they can see how strong it is, and finally stop running into it. The first bank rejected the management buyout before Mo had finished reading the final page of its letter. The second problem arrived 2 days later. An independent valuation placed Callahan Comfort Systems 19% below what Mo had expected. The number was not catastrophic, but it changed everything. The margin she had imagined as comfortable became thin. The retirement plan she had considered secure became conditional. Ray Okonkwo sat across from her in the conference room, both hands around a paper cup of coffee he had not touched. "I'm 58, he said. "I don't know if I can carry this much debt." Mo knew he was not being cowardly. Ray had a wife recovering from surgery, 2 grandchildren in college, and a mortgage with 11 years remaining. He was not afraid of work. He was afraid of becoming the reason everyone else lost what they had built. The Texas corporation renewed its offer that afternoon. Their price was higher, their payment immediate, and their lawyers efficient. If Mo accepted, she could leave with certainty. If she financed the management buyout herself, she would receive installments over 10 years and approximately $2.4 million less. Ray stared at the figures. "Are you sure?" he asked. "You're losing money because of me." "I'm not losing money because of you." "Ray," Mo said, "I'm losing money because of Rosa, because of Dustin, and because of 80 home mortgages." She signed the financing agreement anyway. It was not a heroic signature. Her hand shook. She understood that principles sounded clean only before they were assigned a price. Here, the price had numbers, interest, risk, and 10 years of waiting for money she could have received that very week. The cost did not remain on paper. Karen stopped speaking to her for 8 months. At Thanksgiving in 2026, Mo cooked alone. She prepared turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, green beans, gravy, 2 pies, and rolls for 8 people because her hands had never learned how to cook for one. She set the serving dishes on the table, then removed 7 plates before sitting down. She ate while the house made the noises large houses make when no one answers them. For 4 months, she did not see her grandchildren. No one officially forbade it. There was no cruel message, no slammed door, no sentence she could point to and call punishment. Schedules simply conflicted. Someone was busy, someone had practice. A weekend disappeared, then another. The absence remained polite enough to deny and painful enough to understand. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, Mo drove to Hidden Springs Elementary School shortly before dismissal. She parked 3 blocks away. From behind the steering wheel, she watched children pour through the doors in bright jackets and crooked backpacks. Then she saw Ren, 9 years old, purple backpack far too large for her narrow shoulders, hair coming loose from its braid. Ren ran toward her mother's car, laughing, and climbed inside. Mo's hand moved toward the horn. She stopped it. She did not call Ren's name. She did not open the door. She did not cross the distance and ask a child to choose between joy and the tension of adults. The car pulled away. Mo remained there for 10 minutes after it disappeared. Then she drove home. "I used to think the hardest part of being a mother was giving birth." She later wrote, "Then I thought it was raising a child. Then I learned the hardest part is sitting 3 blocks away, watching your granddaughter laugh, and refusing to ruin something right simply because you are lonely." In December, the first light arrived quietly. Rosa Delgado knocked on Mo's office door, holding an envelope. Inside was a photograph of a bronze plaque the employees had purchased together for the workshop wall. It read, "Callahan Comfort Systems belongs to the people who built it." 1986. Below that was a smaller final line honoring Walt Callahan. Mo read it twice. Then she cried for the first time since Mother's Day, not because of the plaque, not because the company would survive without becoming another corporate acquisition. She cried because Rosa had spelled Walt's name correctly. For months. Mo had been paying the price of protecting what he had built less money. An empty table, unanswered calls, and a granddaughter seen only from a distance. That final line reminded her that someone else still remembered him accurately. For one moment, grief did not feel like abandonment. It felt witnessed. 1 year later, on Mother's Day, Grant arrived with dirt under his fingernails and a work badge clipped to his belt. He had taken a supervisor position at a building materials company in Nampa. The job required 3 interviews, an assessment, and a practical skills test performed under 2 supervisors. For the first time in his life, nobody hired him because his last name was Callahan or because they owed his family anything. 2 evenings each week, he also worked at Callahan Comfort Systems as an apprentice. His instructor was Dustin Voss, 24 years old and 15 years younger than Grant. "Do you know how to crimp a wire terminal?" Dustin asked on Grant's first night. "No." "That's all right," Dustin said. "Your father didn't know on his first day either." Grant did not argue. He picked up the tool and asked Dustin to show him. Mother's Day was held in Mo's backyard. There were no servers, rented tables, floral arrangements, or carefully staged photographs. They ate hamburgers, potato salad, and sliced watermelon from mismatched plates. Lemonade sweated inside a glass pitcher, while the children ran barefoot through the sprinkler and shouted across the wet grass. Grant arrived in a clean blue 2016 Ford F1. 5.0 with 180,000 kilometers on it. He parked beside the fence and handed Mo the keys. "I paid cash," he said. "It's the first vehicle I've ever bought without anyone helping me." Mo examined the worn keyring, then returned it. "It looks dependable. That's what I wanted." Later, 14-year-old Cal went into Mo's office looking for tape. He opened the wrong drawer and found a folded document beneath a stack of old invoices. He carried it into the backyard, his face drained of color. "Grandma, what is this?" Mo recognized it before he reached her. It was a letter declining prosecution, signed by Mo on June 3, 2026, 10 days after Grant had reported her to the police. The prosecutor had been prepared to review the complaint, but Mo had refused to cooperate. She had never told anyone, not Dee, not Karen, and certainly not Grant. Grant took the letter from Cal. He read the date twice. "You signed this before I apologized," he said. "Before I did anything to make it right. Before the medical records request. Yes. While I was trying to challenge you, you were the only person keeping me from having a criminal record. You did not need to know for it to be true." Grant lowered himself onto the concrete step, still wearing his protective work jeans. He began to cry. It was not quiet or graceful. It was the uncontrolled crying of a grown man who finally understood the full size of a mercy he had not earned. His 3 children watched from the lawn, too stunned to move. Cal sat beside him without speaking and placed one hand on his father's back. After a while, Grant wiped his face. "Did you change the trust back?" "Not yet." He nodded. "Good." Mo frowned. "Good if you change it now. I'll start waiting again. I don't want to wait anymore." Late that afternoon, Grant asked to borrow the Corvette keys. Mo handed them over. He did not start the engine. He climbed into the passenger seat, the seat nobody had ever occupied, and remained there for 15 minutes with Walt's notebook open in his hands. People have asked whether I eventually changed the trust. The honest answer is that I still have not decided. Perhaps I will die without deciding. I think that may be all right. Because the day my son stopped asking was the day he no longer needed an answer. What would you do in my place? Would you change the trust or leave it as it is? Write your answer in the comments and tell me where you are listening from. I read every response. If this story made you think of someone, send it to them. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories about family, boundaries, and second chances that carry a real price. Until next time, please do not wait until it is too late to tell the truth to someone you love.